Well, if it weren't for bad news, there would be no Boeing news at all. Well, not really, but you get the idea. But first, we're going to start with some other bad news for Airbus. See what I did there? Well, Airbus is still struggling with one segment of its lineup, and that concerns the baby of the family, the A220. While Airbus is still dealing with the grounding of an estimated 22% of its A220 fleet worldwide due to continuing Pratt & Whitney engine defects, now comes more bad news affecting the former Bombardier manufactured aircraft. The company said on Wednesday, 29 October, that it now expects to only produce 12 A220 aircraft per month next year, compared with a previous target of 14 planes a month. It said it still expects to produce 75 A320 narrow-body planes a month in 2027 and 5 A330 aircraft a month for 2029. In its bigger A350 model, the company continues to target 12 planes a month in 2028. However, Airbus has been having a hard time taking advantage of its dominance over Boeing in recent years because of challenges in procuring engines and cabin equipment that the company needs to assemble its planes and deliver them to customers on schedule. However, to address some of its supply problems, earlier this year, Airbus agreed to buy some Spirit Aerosystems facilities that make parts for its jets in the US, Europe, and Africa in a move to stabilize supply. Airbus executives had previously said that challenges, especially with Spirit, were pressuring plans to increase production of the A220's and A350 wide-body aircraft. Chief Executive Guillaume Ferret said in an earnings call that supply chain hurdles remained, particularly with engines for narrow-body planes. He said that the decision on the A220 is the result of what we call a balance between demand and supply, reflecting a number of supply challenges. Ferret also cited the need to integrate Spirit's operations that provide wings for the A220 aircraft. But again, Airbus wasn't able to take advantage of its position of dominating Boeing, as this latest move from Airbus to lower its A220 production target comes just hours after its American rival Boeing said it booked a $4.9 billion third quarter 777X loss. And yes, we'll get to that in a minute. However, Airbus confirmed its aircraft delivery and financial targets for the year, which now include the effects of currently applicable tariffs and the integration of certain Spirit operations. And while Airbus welcomed the recent trade agreement between the US and the European Union, saying it brought much-needed predictability to an industry that relies closely on integrated supply chains, however, it cautioned that the prospect assumes no additional disruptions to the global trade or the world economy, air traffic, or the supply chain. Still, Airbus is pushing tin out the doors at a brisk rate, as Airbus dispatched 507 commercial aircraft to customers by the end of September and is targeting roughly 820 deliveries for the whole year. But that being said, Airbus tends to historically deliver more aircraft towards the final months of every year. And now turning to Boeing news. On Wednesday, 29 October, Boeing publicly announced what we all knew was coming, as they once again pushed back the first delivery of its 777X model now to 2027 at the earliest, after falling behind schedule on some certification milestones. But the bad news doesn't stop there, because in a huge financial blow, Boeing also announced a third quarter loss of nearly $5 billion charged to the 777X program. CEO Kelly Ortberg said, "We very much underestimated how much work it was going to take to secure the needed approvals," adding that "I'm certainly not throwing the FAA under the bus with this." Sure you're not, Kelly, saying that this is a learning process collectively for both of us. But Ortberg described the setback as partially a paperwork problem, but said the airframe and engines continued to perform well after more than 4,000 hours of flight testing. Still, that reassurance wasn't enough to soothe Wall Street jitters, as Boeing shares dropped 4.4% on Wednesday after the accounting charge topped Wall Street analyst projections. However, this loss and pushback launch date wasn't really a surprise, because back in September, Ortberg warned that the Federal Aviation Administration was taking longer to certify the wide-body 777X than the company would like. And just as a reminder, this jet was supposed to be flying by 2020. But still, each new delay in shipping the 777X lengthens the time it will take Boeing to recoup its investments in the long-delayed wide-body program. And you can rest assured customers and suppliers are going to demand compensation for the continued delays. However, this bad 777 news comes at a time when Boeing was making some real improvements as it delivered 160 commercial aircraft during the quarter, up quite a bit over last year's depressed levels. And there was good news for the MAX too, because last month the FAA started loosening its grip on the production process for both the 737 MAX and the 787 Dreamliner, giving company workers authority to approve some safety checks in-house. Yeah, because we all know how good that worked out last time. But at least the FAA will continue to directly approve the airworthiness certificates needed for each aircraft to fly passengers. October also saw the FAA allow Boeing to ramp up its 737 MAX output to 42 jets a month from its earlier 38 plane pace. That milestone was key to the company's efforts to catch up with mounting orders for the narrow-body jet. In total, Boeing reported a $5.34 billion loss over the third quarter, which included the 777X's impact. However, revenue jumped 30% to $23.3 billion. Reflecting surging commercial jet deliveries. Boeing also ended the third quarter generating more cash than it burned. Well, that's good. It reported $238 million of free cash flow, its first positive quarterly result since 2023. And another Boeing news that isn't so great. Steve Parker, chief of the aerospace company's defense segment, said in a Tuesday letter to workers that the company would not move off its basic contract terms and urged them to cross the picket line. The union local that represents the plant workers said late Tuesday it had filed a second unfair labor practices complaint to the federal regulators over the company's, quote, refusal to bargain in good faith. The union said that every American should be deeply concerned that this company is prolonging the strike and attempting to hire third-party workers without our experience to build some of the most advanced military jets and defense systems in the world. Hey, if you're still watching and can hear my voice, first of all, thank you for that. And take a look at the options on the screen because YouTube thinks you might enjoy one of these videos. I don't know how they know, but YouTube just knows. And if you feel like it, please be sure to like, comment, and I'd appreciate it if you'd consider subscribing. Until next time, yeah, this is Maximus.